Well, I I'll have to tell you two stories about that. The standard story and the true story, because the standard story that I was taught was that it's all got to do with rapid eye movement sleep. There's a, a massive increase in cholinergic activation of the forebrain from the mesopontine tegmentum, and this activates the cortex randomly. And then, the cortex kind of, to quote Alan Hobson, who was the authority at the time that I trained, to quote him, the cortex makes the best of a bad job by joining the dots and turns this chaotic, meaningless activation from below of the cortical mantle, turns it into some kind of episodic experience. So that was the standard view. My own research that you alluded to showed that that standard view was wrong. First of all, if you have damage to the mesopontine tegmentum and you lose REM sleep, you still have dreams. And secondly, there are areas of the forebrain which, when lesioned, lead to a loss of dreaming with preservation of REM sleep. So dreaming and REM sleep are not the same thing. They correlate, but they're not identical. So the part of the brain that does generate dreaming, as opposed to REM sleep, doesn't arise from the mesopontine tegmentum, and it's not cholinergic. It arises from the ventral tegmental area, and it's dopaminergic. So what's going on in the brain when we're dreaming? Something arouses us, whether it be REM sleep or the relative activation of cortex as we descend into sleep at sleep onset, or the relative activation of the brain by cortisol mechanisms in the rising morning phase of the diurnal rhythm. All of these relatively aroused states of the brain, not uniquely to do with REM. There are three common arousal phenomena, let alone the odd things that can happen ad hoc, during the night. This arousal has to attract motivational interest. It has to trigger dopaminergic, the mesocortical, mesolimbic dopaminergic activation. That's what produces the dream. The hallucinatory delusional experience is a hyperdopaminergic state, just as it is in wakeful psychosis. I think the single most important thing. So that's my answer to your question in a way. You said, what's going on in the dreaming brain? I'm saying, well, that's the old story. This is the true story. And then I'd like to add, I think the most important thing about dreaming is its sort of defining feature, which is that it's a state of consciousness that punctuates the unconsciousness of sleep. So the answer as to what is dreaming, why do we dream, what's this all about, I think it is intimately intertwined with the question of consciousness. So why do we become conscious while we're sleeping is the same question as why do we dream. And so to understand what consciousness is for is to take us a very long way toward understanding what dreaming is. To me, as I said a moment ago, it's definitional of dreaming. What do we mean by a dream if we don't mean a conscious experience while we're sleeping? That there is good reason to believe that there are all kinds of cognitive processes going on while we sleep, throughout sleep, that we're not conscious of. There's all memory consolidation is the obvious one. There's oodles of evidence that active memory consolidation processing goes on during sleep, but we're not conscious of it. We're conscious only of the dreams. And to the extent that we are conscious of our cognition during sleep, to that extent we call it dreaming. Yeah, so that's my answer to your question as to whether consciousness can be described as responsiveness to stimuli. I think that there are all kinds of problems with that definition. One of them pivots on what do you mean by stimuli. If you mean extraceptive stimuli, then dreaming is the perfect example that that's not true, because the state of sleep is characterized by a withdrawal from external stimuli. And again, it's not just a behavioral description that, I mean, it's physiologically demonstrably the case that sensory stimuli are sequestered in the epithelium, in the sensory epithelium during sleep, or at least to the extent that they reach cortex. There's no, it doesn't ignite anything. It's just a little, it fizzles out, more or less in the primary projection cortex. So dreaming is a highly conscious state, but it's highly questionable to describe it as response to sensory stimuli. If it includes response to endogenous stimuli, and by stimuli one doesn't just mean an event, but rather a process, then yeah, sure, we could say that. I think that we have to, at this point in our conversation, we have to distinguish between what is known and what is plausible. I don't think that we really know why dreams take the form that they do. We know that dreams are conscious, as I said to you earlier. I think that's definitional of dreaming, and we know that the consciousness of dreams is, first of all, quite strongly affectively charged. And secondly, the cognitive aspects are quite peculiar. They are they don't have the same coherent structure as waking experience. Why that's the case is a matter for debate. I don't think that we know why. I really don't think that we know why dreams have the peculiarly disjointed narrative structure that they do. I don't even think we know why they have any narrative structure at all.
Yeah.
So there are very rare and unusual dreams which do not have narrative structure. Um, there are what are called blank dreams, and schizophrenic patients in particular describe these blank dreams where there's just pure affect with no narrative structure. But they are the exception. That's the normal dream is an episode in the sense of episodic memory. It's an event, an experience that unfolds over a sequence of time, and it has those two other properties that I mentioned. The one of the narrative being disjunctive, and it's not the normal kind of reasonable, rational, logical experience, and it is strongly affectively charged. Although that also is not an absolutely essential feature of dreams; it's a very typical feature.